good excuse for why. In that, the first time I was here in Katowice in the 90s, I did some big metal festival, and I had a really good time. And I figured, well, this will be a good place to come back every year on tour. But unfortunately, somehow, I couldn't make that happen. In that, there's never another offer to come here to Poland. And I just figured I must have pissed someone off. I don't know what it was. And so anyway, it took me quite a while to get back here. And so it's nice to be in front of you. It's nice to be amongst you. And so I reckon there is at least part of the reason that you're here at this festival is because you dig music. And obviously, people come to festivals for all kinds of reasons. It's a way to meet other people. It's a way to check out the girls, check out the guys, whatever it is that you're into. Well, why not? You're alive. Do it. But incessantly, it's probably about the music is the main thing that brought you here. And that being the case, I think, and forgive me if some of my ideas are a bit utopian and hopelessly naive. Forgive me for being like a 5-year-old as I stand here in my 51-year-old frame. But it is my opinion that music people who like music, people who love music, they are reasonable. That is to say, you and I might have many disagreements, and that's fantastic. It keeps the blood thin and makes life interesting. However, the fact that we all love music, and we're all here pretty much for all the bands, obviously, it says to me that you and I are reasonable enough to where if we have any major conflict, we can resolve it without fists, without weapons of any kind. We can go, okay, we agree to disagree. Why? Because we have a central idea that we like the music. And while we may disagree on some things, the fact that we like the music, to me, eclipses our disagreements and our differences. And that's why I feel very safe amongst music people, because I reckon we're all kind of on the same page to a greater extent than a lesser extent. A long time ago in Washington, D.C., I was born in 1961, which is, for many of you, ancient history. Fair enough. And so I lived in small apartment buildings in the Washington, D.C. area with my mother. My mother and father were divorced. And so my mother could afford small apartments, and I would live in a small room at these different apartments we hopped around in. And at a very early age, she bought me my first record player. It was actually the last record player she bought me. My next one I bought myself. But anyway, she bought me a small record player. And to my mom's credit, she loved music and theater and literature. And so our little apartment, no TV. We had lots of books, and we had lots of music, and that was the deal. And my mother, she used to go see John Coltrane, she used to go dig Miles Davis live, and she turned me on to a lot of good music. And she used to buy me records every once in a while. If I really liked the music she was listening to, she'd just give me the record and she'd go buy another one. Or sometimes she'd say, well, I'm going to buy the kid a record. And you may laugh at some of this, but so be it. She bought me Beatles records. This is when they were still making, you have to remember, this is back in the days when they were still making records. That's how old I am. Me and Abraham Lincoln were listening to these records. Okay. So, I would take these records and listen to them over and over again. And it was my impression, something about this high, while America is embroiled in the Vietnam War, and everything was very hostile, including my father. I would listen to these Beatles records, and it was my opinion that the Beatles, they wrote records for kids, and I thought these were children's songs. And just like they seemed friendly, and they were cool, and there was interesting drawings. They had long hair, and they weren't intense looking like my dad. And the more I listened to these records and this music, I thought the Beatles were the dads I never had. They seemed like they'd be friendlier than my dad, who was a champion racist, an amazing homophobe, and a record-breaking misogynist. So he hated people who did not have his bone white skin color. He hated homosexual people, and he hated women. And I would drive around the Washington, D.C. area with him in the court-appointed agreements weekend visit with dad. So saith the divorce court judge. And I drive around this massive American piece of steel with my father, as he would have always the cold can of beer cooling his nutsack. And we drive around Washington, D.C., and he would tell me that women are stupid, And my mother's a woman. He said, look, she's your mother. I want you to respect her, but she's a woman, so you don't have to take her too seriously. Which is an incredibly mixed message, especially when you're like 5 years old. Right? And the only thing, the information you derive from that equation is, wow, adults can be assholes. And my dad was one. And so, it is a breakthrough revelation when at a young age you're like, wow, what an asshole. I came from this somehow. And so at red lights, like an American football player before the snap, the quarterback, he looks from side to side. So at my father looking for cops. And if there's no cops, put the beer, hey you. Yes, Dad? Don't trust Chinese people. Got it. I'm 5, you're ruining my life. And so, the more and more life went on, the more and more records I got, the more and more of an ear I acquired for music, thanks to my mom, who turned me on to Brahms and Chopin, Miles Davis, and Miriam Makeba, the great African singer who sadly passed away a few years ago. You should check her music out. She was so mighty in the face of apartheid that they kicked her out of South Africa. And by the end of her life, she had like 9 or 10 different passports because other countries kept adopting her and said, you are Mother Africa, you can be an American. You're Mother Africa, you can be from France. Because she stood up to apartheid, and South Africa said, whoa, a powerful black woman standing up to a bunch of bullshit white guys? You have to go. Anyway, this was the music that I would listen to. And as the years would go on, I'd spend more and more time in my room with my records, perhaps like some of you, perhaps a little introspective, not able to run as fast as all the other people. At least the Beatles and all those records would not judge me. And so as the years go on, I find myself in this very intense public school in Washington, D.C. We're on like 5 or 6 of the white kids in school, the rest are black. And this is a very, very intense time in America. You know, America's boiling. Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, Black Panthers. It's a very intense time to be an American, especially in Washington, D.C. And so I'm going to this school, and I'm outnumbered by black kids, and that's when I learned about racism. These kids came up to me, they called me a cracker. I didn't understand that. I found out it was a white cracker. And then I was called a Bama, and I still don't know what that means. But I was hit in the face. And all of you, some of you have been hit in the face, and it's awful. But when you're really little and someone hits you in the face, it's not even the pain that's the problem, because it doesn't hurt. You're so numb from terror. It's the invasion of your space, that someone can walk up and just smack you. It's a terrifying thing. And this would happen to me all the time. Yet at the same time, some of these kids would bring what was called a close and play record player. Literally, it's like, it sounds horrible. It's a bad sounding machine. But you would close the record player on top of a 45, and the needle would come down, they would play a 45. And so one kid had this, he'd bring it to school, it's battery operated, and everyone else had Jackson 5 singles, that classic Motown label. And they'd put on like ABC and all those great songs on the little close and play, and kids would pick up a jump rope and pretend it was a microphone, and they'd sing along. And I love this music. There's nothing wrong I can find with a Jackson 5 single to this day. It is as good as it gets. And so in 1960 whatever, I'm checking it out. In 2012, you can still get me going with that music. And so I like the music, yet they're hitting me. And I did not understand, like, we like the same music, what possibly could be our problem? And so thankfully, my mother straightened me out. I go, Mom, why are the kids calling me a bam and hitting me and kicking my ass? And then she said, honey, it's a very tough time in America, be patient. I go, what do I do when they're mean to me? She said, you stick your hand out and you say, hi, I'm Henry, I want to be friends. I said, what if they hit me and I'm crying? And she told me the best lie of all the lies she told me growing up. She said, don't worry, if you smile, no one will know you're crying. And I tried it. You can't tell I'm crying. Ah, white boy's crying. And somewhere around age 9 or thereabouts, there was a public school feeding system for kids. They would bring in like 50 bag lunches for the kids who could not afford a lunch. And so the kids would line up, and they'd get this this kind of dripping peanut butter sandwich and a brown banana, or something like that. So one day the kids line up, and there's one more kid than there are lunches. So the line comes to an end. There's 2 kids in line. The last guy gets the lunch. The guy behind him, he's got no lunch. This kid takes a pencil out of his pocket, takes the pencil and shoves it through the hand of the kid ahead of him and took the lunch. We all stood there and looked at this pencil right through the guy's hand. It looked like a movie prop. It did not look real. It wasn't kind of sort of in the hand. It was cleanly bisecting the hand. And I'll never forget this as long as I live. It did not bleed. And he stood there screaming in complete terror at the mutilation of his hand. He's like, ah, because it's an awful thing to see. And the rest of us were like, it was terrifying. And then finally the teachers came and dragged him away, and I guess the kid lived to fight another day. And so I became like my fellow students, where I learned how to fight. I learned how to fight back. It wasn't the best way to be socialized, but that's what I learned. And so eventually I got so intense on all of that they threw me out of the Washington, D.C. public school system, and they sent me to a suburban school where the teachers are very nice, and you can call them by their first name. And all the students around me have a private school education, and they're very, very educated. I'm woefully behind them, and so they're very, very fleet of foot. They're intellectually agile, and I'm flat-footed, and I can't hang out with them. And so one day, around 5th grade, there's a kid who beat me out for a touchdown. We're running on a muddy field, like touch football. He's running, and I lunge to tag him. He keeps accelerating. I go face first into a bunch of mud. Shirt covered in mud, face covered in mud. I stand up. It looks like a movie. And everyone's laughing at me. Hey, there's Henry with a bunch of mud. I was so mad and so humiliated by that guy, I reacted in the one way I knew how. I walked up to him, I pulled a pencil out of my pocket, and I shoved it into the back of his leg as hard as I could, and I sunk it into the back of his leg. And I don't know why that's funny to you. I am owed a pencil in the ass from a kid named Tim, who's my age. He's 50-something as well. And one day I'm going to be walking down the street, and some aging adult's going to walk and go, and I'm going to go, ah! Were you the, yeah! I've been looking for you! And so, more and more, I was, becoming a product of my environment, but more and more the music was all I could understand. I liked people on records. I could handle someone on a record. Mary McCabe would sing to me. I liked it. Dionne Warwick would sing to me. I liked it. Gladys Knight and the Pips would sing to me. I liked them. Gladys Knight was my other mother. And so I liked these voices because they were not threatening to me. And so at that school, understandably, you stab a kid with a pencil, they throw you out. So they've put me into a school where I'm supposed to learn my lesson. And they put me into a school where the teachers can basically stand you up and punch your lights out. From 6th grade until graduation, I stood in a ridiculous prep boy uniform with ex-soldiers from World War II, Vietnam, and Korea yelling at me. They were my instructors, picking me up, yelling at me, spitting in my face. You call this an essay? This essay stuff, you were good. And if you're kind of a rebellious young guy, you don't like this too much. And so I wasn't a good student. I was like some of you. I didn't like school. School didn't like me. I went deeper and deeper into the music. One day I'm on the school bus. We're going to school. It's a long, I live in the city. This school's way out in the suburbs. It's a long trip. And so I'm in the back of the bus with this other loser named George. George had bad skin and bad thick glasses, and no one liked him, no one liked me. So we were like two peas in a pod no one wanted to look at. And he always had this little tape recorder with one speaker. I don't even know if they make them anymore. And they don't sound so good, but it's better than nothing. And he would bring in his tape recorder, powered by those big batteries that you can wound a dog with if you throw them at him. And he would always have some music. And so one day, we're back in the back of the bus, he pops in this factory-made white cassette with black lettering. He pops it in, and he hits the play button, and this music comes out that is so savage, so violent, so brutal. Everything in my world stopped, and I'm listening to this guitar. I never knew a guitar could do that. And then the singer starts singing, and he sounds like a frickin' lunatic. He can't hold a note, but I can hear every single word he says. And he's not trying to be melodic. He's just telling me the story about a guy who tried to like people, and people didn't like him. So he went out for a while, and he came back to the city he was born and raised in, and he killed everyone in it. I'm like, damn, I want to do that like every day.